Please join me in welcoming Wallace Hall. Thank you for being here. Very good to see you. Mr. Hall, good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here.
I'm glad to be here so far.
Good. Well, I make no representations about the balance of our time together. What exactly is a censure? I told you when I called you to ask you to do this interview that censure sounded to me like bladder medication. If you take censure and symptoms persist for more than 4 hours, contact your doctor. What exactly is censure, legally?
Legally, I don't know that it holds any meaning. Really, 75% of the people that asked me why was I censored.
Censored?
Right.
Right.
And I said, I don't think I was censored.
That's another concern, separate,
exactly.
right, yeah.
And, but I...
So as a practical matter, you're vindicated and onward you go with no penalty for anything that was alleged to have happened previously.
I certainly don't feel in any way diminished by, by what they did.
Or moved to change your behavior or your approach to your work as a regent one iota.
No, I've continued really unabated in trying to conduct my duties as a regent all the way through.
Right.
And I made a point of that. I was very clear about that.
Right.
All along the way.
Why are you talking now? A lot of curiosity about your side of this story, which has largely been told from the perspective of the other side. You've been asked to speak publicly. I've asked you, others have asked you over time to come out in public, speak before an audience, on camera, tell your side. You obviously have a point of view, but you declined to. You did not testify before the committee. I believe you were the only invited witness not to testify. Why not?
So it's really a two-part question. Let me take the second part first, which is the question about why did I not go and sit with the Transparency Committee. The process that they laid out was, I thought, very biased, unfair, but most importantly, they knew the whole time virtually everything that I knew. They'd seen all the emails. They talked to people privately without me being present. They'd done secret interviews. All of that had happened. They knew what I knew, for the most part. And there was basically 3 buckets of information, which is where all the real questions that mattered were. And so keep in mind, the three buckets, the first one is, I learned much of what I consider to be unsettling information through my review of TPI, existing TPI, or Texas Public Information Act request files. Many of the documents within them had already been identified as being confidential by the Attorney General. So that was one bucket. Another bucket was there were attorney-client privilege. This was material that was a privilege that was owned by UT Austin, not by me, or UT System, not by me. I could not waive that that privilege, if you will. Right. And the last item had to do with FERPA, which was simply, and I would make FERPA anything having to do with student information. It's private in nature. There's all kinds of definitions. Right. If I went before the committee without a subpoena, and I was the only official that was not offered a friendly subpoena, then I would be creating a scenario to where they could ask me questions. And yes, I've reviewed 100,000 documents. I've reviewed more documents than that in emails on my side, or at least that many. And if I had said anything about that was attorney-client privilege, or student confidential information, or ruled confidential by the AG, that would then become the basis of the allegations against me. Without the protection of a subpoena? Without any protection. If they'd given me the subpoena, I could have answered, I would have been compelled to answer their questions, and they knew that. That's not what they
I believe Chairman Pitts may have also testified without the benefit of a subpoena, but I understand your point. The majority of the people who testified had the benefit of a subpoena.
Yes.
Yeah. And you felt like in the absence of a subpoena, you could not adequately tell your story. Now, one might be moved to say, if you've done nothing wrong, you in the royal sense, then what do you have to risk by going before the committee and just telling your side? Well, the risk is that I forget where I learned that information. Right. So you might misspeak. I could divulge something without intentionally doing so. Mr. Pitts didn't have a subpoena, but in terms of UT system officials, UT Austin officials, everybody else did. You know that on the day, August 11th, when they moved to censure you, it was said in both the censure report and by at least one of the co-chairs of the committee that a vote for censure is not a vote against impeachment. So the risk of further action by this committee lingers. So aren't you still at risk on some levels in talking today?
Probably, and going back to the first part of your question, I chose not to speak because the committee was still going on. They were conducting their business, and I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to be out giving interviews on the one hand and then being held up as not being willing to speak with them while I really was. Yes, there's a risk, but the reality of it is, I forgot which House committee met recently, and I think the Transparency Committee just received their budget of $15,000, which I think is not much of a...
You do damage with $15,000, right?
It's not much of a vote of confidence, I don't think, in their own process.
So here you have an opportunity to tell your side. What motivated you and what motivates you to do what you do? You understand that in the absence of information, people fill in the blanks. So you have effectively been a blank screen onto which people on both sides for more than a year have projected their sense of what's up here. Conspiracy theorists see one thing, rabid supporters see another thing, but the reality is only you really know what has motivated you to do what you've done. In brief, tell us what was the motivation. Why do this? Why do this?
I didn't realize what I was getting into in the first place. Had I known, would I have done it? Probably. But the reality of it is I saw this as a huge opportunity to contribute to the well-being of Texas. I've long viewed education in general, K through 12, higher ed, as being maybe the most important investment that a people can make in their future. I've been a critic of higher ed for a couple of decades. I think it hasn't been a very functional market, if you will. And to get the opportunity to serve on this board with UT's system, where there's only 9 of us serving, I viewed it as an opportunity really to have a chance to make an impact.
So pure of heart, positive impact. Let's see if we can't make higher ed better.
Yes.
Right. Now you know that the people who have opposed your efforts in this and who continue to be your critics say that this was really just a ploy to get Bill Powers. That this was, from the very beginning, that was your agenda item only, was to get President Powers out of his job. And you know that some people even see the hand of people who are responsible for you being in this position, that it was their agenda that you've been put in there to execute. You know, you've heard that.
Right, sure.
Right. What do you say about that?
I'd say it's untrue. I mean, it's absolutely untrue. And the first president that I went out of my way to visit with and to attempt to build a relationship was President Powers. And nobody would do what I've done for, I mean, where's the motive? I mean, there's no, everything that I've done has been transparent, certainly been transparent to the politicians who've been looking, and it's certainly been transparent to the board and the chancellor. I mean, I have focused on things that are operational integrity, mission integrity, and that's where my focus has been. And any day of the week, President Powers had an opportunity to come to the table with us and to move forward in this. That wasn't my decision.
So you were not out to get President Powers, or you're out to get him now. People will say, well, whatever was the case previously, it seems to be this region's, and maybe not only this region's, but it seems to be this region's singular mission to make sure that President Powers is no longer President Powers as quickly as possible.
Well, it would be disingenuous for me to say that now that he has turned in his resignation, what some would call a forced resignation, and he leaves June 1st.
June 2nd, yeah.
June 2nd.
Right.
That, therefore, I think it's okay that we continue to sit in this dysfunctional environment, because I don't.
Well, you've in fact said specifically that. You said to Skip Hollandsworth of Texas Monthly earlier this year, after President Powers had announced his intention to resign on June 2nd of 2015, this is a quote from you, the fact remains the board cannot do its job as long as he remains president.
That's correct.
Can you explain that, please?
I'm going to go back a little bit, and I have, first of all, a couple words about Chancellor Cigarella. I have not met a kinder, smarter man than Francisco. Just a terrific guy and a great leader. But we've been put in a position, he was put in a position in 2010 where I frankly think that the board failed him. He came to the board, his executive vice chancellors came to the board, and they had an issue with their president. And the board leadership did not support him. And when you do that, you undermine his authority. And he's been struggling with that ever since. And I think he has done the best he could under the circumstances. But basically, we're in a situation where the board, lost its ability to govern at UT for a variety of reasons. So I don't think that we, as a board, even prior to my arrival, have been in a proper governance position at UT Austin for many years.
Doesn't he work for you, though? I mean, in theory, some combination of the mechanism is a little more complicated than what I'm about to say.
Right.
But in theory, if the president is an obstacle to the proper governance of the system, or he's a cancer on the University of Texas at Austin, however one might characterize it if one opposed him, theoretically, the regents have the power to orchestrate directly or indirectly the outcome that you're talking about.
Sure.
So why haven't you?
Yeah, you would think so the strange environment we find ourselves in is this. And I've learned a lot about this. I thought I was going to be dealing with faculty issues and traditional higher ed issues when I came on the board. I didn't realize the political involvement in an inappropriate way in higher ed, certainly here in Texas, and I've seen it in other places. But the reality of it is, we had Senator Kel Seliger, who's chair of higher ed for the Senate, actually trying to make a law passed in the House to limit the board's ability to do just that, to fire the president of the University of Texas if the board so chose. And when they knew that was going to be vetoed by Governor Perry, and appropriately, I think, Senator Watson came up with a new scheme. His new scheme was when Chairman Foster was being reappointed and Regents Aliseda and Hildebrand were coming up, he created a Gordian knot for us. He took a situation where he asked the three of them, would they agree that they would not agree to fire the president of the University of Texas unless the chancellor brought the motion forward? Well, I think it was completely inappropriate for the senator to ask that question, number one, in terms of a conflict between the executive branch and the legislative branch. But more importantly, that's not how our rules work. Okay, that's not exactly how a president gets dismissed. But to clean up that problem, he went one step further and he said, and will you also promise that you not change the rules to make it any easier for the board to circumvent what you just agreed to?
So you believe that the legislature somehow rigged this so that even if it was the wishes of the regents to see President Powers out of his job, it was practically impossible?
I'm not sure I would use the word rigged, but I would say they used every tool available to them to defend an individual and not allow the board to function as it's designed.
Will he be president on June 2nd of 2015?
I have no idea.
Do you intend to leave him be for all practical purposes between now and then? Supporters of his say basically, well, he's agreed to resign, leave him alone, and let him ride out his last year. Others have said, honestly, this is not the end, this is the beginning, and that the next year is going to be a year full of scrutiny. The admissions investigation, which we'll talk about in a second, is coming. Right. Other things may come up, and in fact, the regents may very well continue to bang on this. He may not be president again, all the way through June 2nd.
And I'm not making any predictions on what happens between now and then. I mean, obviously, we do have, the chancellor has an investigation on admissions that's ongoing.
Right.
I consider that to be a very serious matter in terms of our questions about our integrity. But fundamentally, nothing has changed. I mean, I never heard the chancellor, I never heard Dr. Reyes, the executive vice chancellor, I never heard anybody say that they now trust him.
Right. And
the issues haven't changed, the challenges facing UT Austin haven't changed.
So no guarantees.
Oh,
no guarantees.
No.
Let's get into the substance of this. So the FERPA issue that you alluded to, right. FERPA is Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Right. Complicated situation and two different views of it. If you read on the one hand the Rusty Hardin report for the committee and the committee's ultimate censure review, right. tells one set of facts. The Philip Hilder report, Philip Hilder was the outside counsel to the UT system who investigated this independently, tells another side of the FERPA situation. As I understand it, you came into possession of several documents, student records, that contained, at least in one case, information that would be considered protected, private, under FERPA laws. Take it from there, because I know what's been alleged, but it's a little bit of a Rashomon deal. I want to hear your side of what happened.
Well, without speaking specifically about the substance of any of the emails, I think we need to talk a little bit about how that happened.
Sure.
Because it's been alleged that I've made all these open records requests, which are a legal process by which we ask for documents from many of our state agencies. And in reality, in my name, I made 5 open records requests in June of 13, which yielded something less than 4,000 pages of documents. the reality of it is in an attempt to make our system more transparent, I've been trying to push all of our open records processes to the internet so they can be viewed and sorted, by the public, reduce FTEs, all kinds of good reasons to do so. So when I asked to see the sum total of what we had, because I was being told that it was going to be tough to get all this on, it's going to take a lot of people, I said, so let me see how much we have. So I got them and I went through them. What constitutes FERPA or not is complex. I mean, I can't pretend anybody can say at any point in time what all FERPA is, because it kind of depends on when you find out about it and what it contains and where a student was in their application or whatever. But I consider all student information private.
Right.
And so that's how I came into
possession. But the committee, in the report censoring you, the committee alluded to should not be possessed and could not be distributed as it related to documents that contained private information that was protected by FERPA. So that if you were in possession of documents, that was a problem, and if you passed them along to other people, that was a problem. It is alleged, again, by the Hardin report, that you possessed them, and that over the strong request, if not insistence, of the General Counsel of the Board of Regents, Francie Frederick, that you passed those documents along to both your private lawyers and to somebody in the Attorney General's office. Did you do what is alleged?
So obviously the committee looked at this with great detail, and they obviously came to a different conclusion than what they say publicly. They had, and this is part of the problem. So we have a couple people on the committee who are doggedly pursuing this. Representative Fisher primarily, and he's a lawyer. And so when they have private meetings with UT system personnel, and they learn of things that are absolutely exculpatory to the claims that they're making, I think they have an obligation to bring that to the public, that they should have brought that to the committee.
So what's exculpatory that they heard that I have not just said? Because again, what I'm asking is, what is alleged that you've done? That you were in possession of documents containing FERPA-protected information, and that over the objections of Ms. Frederick, you passed them on to your private attorney and to the Attorney General.
Let me say this, and because the district attorney does have a file open, they are investigating actively. I don't want to say too much about the FERPA, but I will say this. If the Transparency Committee truly thought that I had violated the law, don't you think they should have actually brought articles of impeachment against me?
Well, they did refer, if I understand, the way that this matter got to the Travis County District Attorney's Office is because it was referred by the committee. So the committee obviously felt strongly enough about what they believed you had done that they referred this for a criminal investigation.
I don't think that took much courage on their part.
Did you tell Ms. Frederick, the General Counsel of the Board of Regents, that you would destroy those FERPA-protected documents and then you didn't destroy them, as is alleged?
Without getting into all the detail, I can tell you I'm very comfortable with every act that I took concerning all of the emails, all the documents and data that I possessed.
You're not concerned about the outcome of this?
Well, nobody likes to be threatened with an indictment and, and a loss of, facing jail time. No, nobody likes that, but as I said, I'm very comfortable with
on the facts.
Absolutely.
I wondered where the Travis County DA's investigation was, the status of it. I read in Co-Chairman Dan Flynn's letter to the Republican caucus on August 11th, the DA's investigation is proceeding and we expect to hear something back soon. I looked at the calendar and I thought, well, it's a couple weeks, haven't heard anything. So I called Greg Cox last night, the head of the Public Integrity Unit, and I asked, what is the status of the Wallace Hall investigation? What he told me on the record was, the investigation is ongoing. We've requested and received and are reviewing documents. We'll be taking witnesses to a grand jury in the near future. We expect this matter to be resolved by the end of the year. I'd prefer it be resolved sooner, but it's all about scheduling grand juries. Have you been officially notified, or were you aware until I just mentioned this to you, that they have now progressed to the impaneling of a grand jury stage?
I was aware of that.
You are aware of that?
Yes.
Does that concern you? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but my assumption is that they look at this initially, and if they decide there's nothing there, they don't necessarily have to go to the grand jury stage. Right?
Yeah. I'm not a district attorney. I don't know how the process works. If they think they need to take it and vet it and bring forth witnesses, that's the process. And as I said, it would be nicer if they said, we closed the file and we moved on. But I'll go through the process.
Facts are on your side, you believe?
I absolutely feel like I have conducted myself appropriately at every step of the way.
Let me ask you a philosophical question about this issue, because the issue that the FERPA issue is about admissions. It started as a question about the law school, but it's actually now been broadened, and again, we'll come to the Kroll investigation in a second. It's a more broad question about admissions and whether people of influence writing letters sought to impact the admissions process in some deleterious way. I don't mean this facetiously, but what's wrong with clout? What is wrong with somebody in a position of authority, elective office or somebody else, a regent?
What's right about it?
Well, I didn't ask you that. I asked you what's wrong with it. Theoretically, you'll tell me what's wrong with it.
Well,
what's wrong with it?
Part of it is when I ask you what's right with it, there's nothing right with it. We've all seen our children or grandchildren or both, and families we know. I mean, struggle really hard. These kids work really hard to get to college.
Right.
And they're measured every step of the way. They get graded. They take all the the state tests. They take it. They write the letters. They their essays. They work terrifically hard to get there. And they think there's a set of rules, okay, that everybody's playing by. This is what you do, and you compete. And this is the first step in their whole educational process. They either get in which case they know they made the grade, or they don't.
Or they don't.
And if they don't, they've learned nothing from the process, number one. They don't know why they didn't make it, okay? And, so they don't make it. But, so look at it if it's like in the Olympics. You're showing up for the Olympics. And everybody's going to compete, and the winners get the medals, which I would say is a seat at the university. Okay, is it fair? Is it fair for somebody with clout to be able to have a special post-Olympics to where other kids can get in, not having had competed against everybody? I don't think so.
So that's your issue. So do you feel the same way? One imagines that you feel the same way about legacy admissions, where you have an alumnus of a university whose child applies. Child may not be as academically qualified as other people who apply, don't have the benefit of that legacy relationship. Kid gets in because he's a legacy or she's a legacy. So theoretically, based on that logic,
well, certainly,
legacy admissions is also bad.
Well, certainly for public institutions, at one point in time, I didn't think I had that big a problem with it. And Regent Alex Cranberg and I had lengthy discussions, and then as my exposure to higher ed lengthened, I've come around.
You've come around.
I've come around, and while I think there is certainly from the development perspective, there's a place for legacies, because there's certainly big endowment money that can be raised. I think if you're going to do it, I think if you're going to do anything where there's clout that gets to be wielded, it just needs to be known. Everybody needs to know.
So you would make it so that through the admissions process, the fact that one had a relative, parent or grandparent or so on, who was an alumnus of the university, you would make it so that that status had no bearing at all on admissions.
Well, it has no. It's legally not supposed to have any status now.
Right.
I mean, it's precluded by law the way.
Right, but you and I both know.
Well, I don't know. I don't know why people get in.
Right. Well, let me ask the question in a different way. I have a high school senior this year, and so we've been traveling around looking at colleges around the country. And what I hear in every admissions office around the country is, we build a class. It's not all about test scores. It's not all about grades. We want to build a class. Now, I'm talking specifically about the undergraduate portion of this controversy.
Right.
Why shouldn't the admissions office have the latitude to build a class? They need a tuba player. They need a center for the football team. To give two examples, they may not have the highest test scores. They may not have the best grades. But the discretion of the admissions office has historically been, not just here, but theoretically in higher ed broadly, you build a class. So why are test scores and grades dispositive of this? Why is there not the latitude that has historically been enjoyed by admissions offices to build a class?
Well, I think there is latitude. I'm not advocating against.
You just don't like that kind of latitude. You don't like latitude that involves letters being. I
certainly think if you're talking about a private institution,
right,
they have the latitude to keep everything secret and do whatever they want.
Right.
But we're talking about the public institutions. I don't think that's appropriate. If you're a U.S. senator, you have the right to appoint a number of people to the military academies.
Correct.
It's known. It's known. So if we want to do that in Texas, if we want the senators and House reps to have the ability to get people into universities, let's just be upfront about it. Let's make sure everybody understands when clout's being used.
Let's be transparent.
Make it transparent. That's what I'm pushing for.
There are 15 institutions in the UT system. As far as I know, the only institution whose admissions you've been focused on, University of Texas at Austin. Have you asked to see letters written on behalf of applicants to the other system institutions by legislators?
No, I have not.
Why not?
Well,
that feeds the conspiracy that this is a UT Austin deal.
Yeah. So I've visited, I want to say 13 out of the 15 institutions. I'm probably down in Austin on average once a week.
Okay.
I spend between, on average 20 to 40 hours a week on UT system business, a lot. I mean, I've set aside my family time, business time, put a lot into this. Some of the task forces, so the problem that I've found was at UT Austin. It wasn't at UT Dallas.
But you haven't not found a problem at those other campuses. You just haven't looked.
That's true. That's true.
Will you be looking?
But it's kind of like the license gifts, the software license gifts to UT. I was accused of picking on Austin. Well, I mean, there were other universities that we had that also had some of these that need to be removed.
But that was your focus. But the UT Austin case was your focus specifically in that case.
Well, that's what brought it to my attention, and then we did a review of the entire system.
Right.
So I don't think that's the appropriate to look at it. Just because President or Chancellor Cigarella has lost trust in President Powers doesn't mean I need to go scan the other 14 presidents.
I guess I'm just trying to understand how endemic an issue you consider this to be and how systemic your fix is intended to be. Reeve Hamilton of the Tribune wrote a story a couple of months ago about letters written by some of those very same legislators to the President and Chancellor of Texas A&M University System. Same deal. I'm not a big believer in everybody does it so it's okay, but it has been kind of a never thus thing, and where do you stop? And have you gone to your fellow regents at A&M and Tech and said, you need to do what we're doing here and ferret out undue influence on admissions, or are you just focused only on this?
I'm spending all my time on the UT system.
Right.
But the issue is we don't know what's going on. Chancellor is now, conducting an investigation, which is underway, and we don't know what's actually happening yet. Until you actually know the breadth and the
magnitude of the issue,
and if it's taking place, how does it work? What does it look like? And then when you figure that out, then you can make adjustments and fix the problem on a system-wide basis.
Can you help quantify this for me, the magnitude of this problem? So I ran some numbers this morning. So as I get it, these are rounded estimates. 38,000 applicants to UT for spots in the freshman class. 15,000 accepts. Somewhere just south of 8,000 enroll.
Right.
Of the 15,000 accepts, again, if I'm doing the math correctly, just north of 11,000 are automatic admits top 10% rule, or whatever the percent is right now.
7.
And then about 3,750 to 3,800 of those 15,000, again, if I do the numbers correctly, are discretionary or holistic admits. So what numbers are we talking about relative to the 15,000 admits? How many people are we talking about would fall into the category of let in as undergraduates, do you imagine, through some untoward means? What's the percentage?
Well, I have no idea what the scope of the problem is.
Is it 1%? Is it 10%?
I couldn't even begin to tell you.
So we don't know if this is an epidemic problem or if it's a little problem.
That's correct. Yeah. We don't know, but the problem is that we have an admissions process that doesn't lend itself to transparency or understanding, even by the board.
Right.
So we're trying to figure out what the scope of it is. I can tell you that when the top 10% law came in, I want to say it was in 1999 to current period of time, you had a situation where you had all the freshman seats were discretionary. And the university was able to build its class. Well, we've got a situation now to where that number has shrunk greatly. And so in both real and nominal terms, the demand for those seats has gone through the roof.
And so the relevant percentage here is not the percentage versus 15,000, it's the percentage versus the 3,700 or so.
It's the percent, and I don't even think the number's that high, frankly.
You think it's lower than that?
I think it's lower than that, but I've never seen a number that anybody's willing to stand behind.
Right.
And so the problem really is, if you, and this is where I am right now, is we have a situation, potentially, where the very people that are responsible for the law, okay, the politicians who made the law, and the administration of the university who's responsible for the implementation and the efficacy of that law, are somehow benefiting from the supply-demand inequity.
You think they're in cahoots?
Listen, all I can tell you is what I've seen, and I think there's enough concern that the chancellor...
You think there's smoke? We'll see if there's
the Chancellor decided that he was going to run an investigation, and I certainly support it.
Let me ask you a question about you. I've met your two sons who are here today. Seem like very nice young men. I mean nothing by asking this, but I need to ask you, have you ever, either in the course of their application process to the university or on behalf of family friends whose kids were applying, have you ever asked a legislator or have you ever asked a person of influence to write a letter on their behalf? Did you ask them to write a letter on their behalf?
No.
Never?
Never.
Did you, as a regent, ever write a letter? Because regents are occasionally asked. I don't know if there's a ban on regents writing letters of recommendation, but did you ever write a letter of recommendation?
No.
On behalf of any applicant to the university?
No.
You never did?
I was instructed when I came on the board that we were advised not to write letters, and I followed the advice.
So you did not do that?
Did not.
Is there a standard that we ought to be, I guess we got it earlier, so just don't do it. No letters of recommendation from elected officials, full stop. That would be the standard that you would apply.
No, because, I mean, we all know the world doesn't necessarily work that way. Not typically. I mean, frankly, I was surprised to find the letters, and I'm sure there's a lot more letters there, if you will. But that's not the way I think. If somebody's doing something that is not upfront, they're not doing it typically in a way that's going to be recorded. I mean, it's going to be done.
So you think there's no way to effectively, I mean, you really can't ban every bit of this. It's going to happen to some degree, regardless of what you do.
Well, I think you need to have, the right leadership, and you need to set a culture.
So why can't, I come back to why can't the board do blank as sort of a frame around some of this? Why can't the board, if the board's decision is this is bad, and maybe we'll get there after the investigation, why can't the board just put a policy in place saying the admissions offices of UT system institutions may not consider, I guess you can't say may not accept because that's a little weird, but may not consider in any way letters of recommendation for elected officials as part of the admissions process? Why can't you make a policy?
Well, I think the board can make that policy, but I think...
Why doesn't the board make that policy?
Well, because as I said, we don't know the scope. First of all, we don't know the scope of what's taking place right now.
Right.
We're going to have a new chancellor. We'll have 3 new members of the board come on in the spring.
February, right? Yeah.
And we'll have the
benefits of the
four
investigation.
corners of this investigation.
Right.
And then I expect everybody will do a very serious discussion about this. And,
right.
and we want to have the highest quality, highest integrity admissions processes we can.
Let's talk about the Kroll investigation quickly. So it's Kroll Associates. They're in the midst right now of an investigation. I've seen varying reports on when the investigation will be concluded, September 30th or October 15th, but soon.
Yes.
Soon. Have you had any communication with the people from Kroll at all as part of this?
No.
Do you know the Kroll people? Did you know the Kroll people in any way, any personal relationship, any ties at all to this particular group prior to the investigation?
Nope.
No. The timing is interesting in the eyes of some because it is said that if this investigation is over by mid-October, the findings of it would come to be public at a time when Chancellor Cigarroa is still in the job. Admiral McRaven, I would say the cavalry has not arrived, although that's the wrong military cliche. Admiral McRaven has not come in as chancellor. Some people think that the way this has been structured time-wise is an opportunity for you to get the results and go, aha, Bill Powers out the door.
An opportunity for the board?
For the board, to say on the basis of the investigation, the timing is convenient if your goal is for this investigation to be the impetus for him to be out of his job prior to June 2nd. Yeah, anything to do with that? The timing?
No, I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, the chancellor got the information that he received when he got it.
When he got it. So that's the driver of the
right.
timing.
And then he moved forward. And I think everybody wants, as a board and as a system, I think we've failed in our ability to investigate ourselves. I think we've done a very poor job, certainly in my tenure. And they drag on too long.
Yeah.
And we just need to have do it right the first time. It needs to be factual, and it needs to be robust.
And then the results are the results.
And then we move forward.
I wondered how Kroll could conceivably, within the realm of the very same FERPA, do an adequate investigation if private information that is not in, we can't see it. How is Kroll going to be able to see private information and do their jobs? I understood something to the effect that they've signed an agreement that they can see information but not names, so that they're able to look at data but not. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know anything about that specifically.
But I mean, it presents an obstacle, one thinks. How do you adequately investigate this if you don't have access to information because it is protected?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer.
Don't know how that happened. No. Let's get to the open records request. This was one of the big issues that was discussed in advance of the of the committee hearings, the Hardin report again, and then the committee censure, onerous and burdensome, that somehow you were besieging the University of Texas with open records requests. Right. President Powers testified something like 800,000 pages, and at a cost to the university they estimated of more than $1 million. The Jim Schutze story in the Dallas Observer that came out yesterday, you pushed back on that and said, preposterous, it's not 800,000, it's more like 100,000. Is that true?
That's true.
Yeah. And again, this is just part of your effort to make the process more transparent.
Right. So, and I said this.
That's your motivation.
And I told Jim this in his piece. I mean, I made a presentation to the Chancellor and Chairman Gene Powell prior to one of our board meetings that we held in San Antonio a couple years ago. It seemed inappropriate that we weren't taking advantage of technology to get our open records online. Right. You know, they weren't digitized. They weren't available. I come from the private sector. You know, I appreciate the need and the desire for the public to know what our government's doing. So I'm a big fan of the transparency. So I thought to myself, well, here's one way we can really get the information out. We can help the reporters get information. That way you don't have to ask for the same, you know, the same stuff he's asked for, she's asked for.
Because it's already
there. You can scan it, you can search it, you can watch it, you can get push emails. I mean, it's pretty simple. And they thought it was a good idea, and then, you know, we were slow to get it implemented. And I wanted to know why, and they said, well, we think it's going to take a lot of people. And I just said, well, how many people? We don't know. I said, why don't we know? Well, because we don't know how much stuff there is. I said, okay, so let's leave the HIPAA aside. Let's leave the health side of the house aside. Yep. Let's look at academics. Who has the most stuff? Austin. How much do they have? We don't know. I said, okay, I want to see it. I just want to see the volume of it. And I offered to go over to UT Austin and look at it, but you know, they thought it would be better if it was brought to the system. So they brought it over, and I looked at it. And it's just not that much stuff.
It's not as much as it's been alleged.
It's not that much stuff. I mean, any lawyer in the room, anybody who's been in a lawsuit, and seen the amount of paper generated in one of these things, it's just not that much material.
Does the cost estimate concern you? I mean, $1 million is, you know, these days $1 million doesn't seem to some people like all that much. It's still $1 million. And the fact is, there's whatever the expense is of meeting the need to handle the request.
If it were $1 million, it would bother me.
It would bother you. Do you know for a fact that it's not $1 million?
I don't believe there's any documentation or justification to support his number. None.
Small matter in the censure report. They said he's very big on asking for open records from other people, but when he's asked, I'm paraphrasing, when he's asked for documents himself, he doesn't turn them over. They cited a specific case of meeting notes that you had taken that were requested under public information request that you did not turn over. So the logical question one might ask is, why is it good for the goose but not for the gander?
Well, I think it's good for everybody. And
so then why didn't you turn over the notes?
Well, I missed it. Okay, that does happen. I've turned over, I don't know how many, 20,000, 30,000 pages of documents.
So that was an
to
accident.
the UT system.
Yeah.
And typically I don't prepare notes before a meeting. This was before a meeting we were going to be talking about the leadership at UT Austin. I wanted to make sure that I had my notes of what I wanted to say, because it was very important that I take that opportunity. And I didn't think about it again. It was on my iPad, and it wasn't until we were searching for something else later that I go, oh, I forgot about this.
Did you request that witnesses change their testimony or alter their testimony? That's been alleged as well.
I know it's been alleged, and it's absolutely untrue. Never happened.
Never happened.
Never.
Let me ask you about your personality. You seem very charming, very pleasant today. You haven't taken a swing at me yet. There's still time left. But there is a certain amount of fascination with your personality as one aspect of this. Style points. Will this be decided on style points, as they say in college football? The Hardin report, quote, vindictive pattern of bullying administrators. Dan Flynn's letter referenced earlier to the Republican caucus. Disruptive, flippant, and defiant behavior towards university officials and members of the legislature. Right. My favorite characterization of your personality came from you in the Skip Hollandsworth story in Texas Monthly. Quote, people might call me an asshole, but I'm just very direct. That was your own characterization of your personality. Is your personality, or should your personality or your approach to dealing with people be an issue in this?
Well, I would agree most with my own characterization of myself.
Surprise, surprise.
You know, and you know, I've also been called a grenade thrower. right? So that's
by a fellow regent,
right,
I think.
And everybody's entitled to their opinion.
Right.
I would say that the people who are saying those things about me may feel like I'm throwing a grenade at them. If you're going to be defending the status quo, if you're going to be defending opacity,
yep.
if you're going to be defending improper accounting, if you're going to be doing these things, and I'm asking you questions, and I'll make an allegation that this shouldn't be done this way. I mean,
yeah.
maybe you feel like you're beleaguered. Maybe you feel like I'm being unjust.
Should you have done this differently? I mean, we all second guess ourselves. In retrospect, should you have approached this from a personality or a style standpoint differently? Would we be where we are now had you done that?
I did do that. And
so you think your personality as a factor in this has been mischaracterized?
Oh, listen, it's not as bad as what they would say it is, number one.
Right.
Number two is that all my questions I asked were in private. They were through channels. Yep. I wasn't going out there to the press. I wasn't banging on the drum. I wasn't making allegations. I wasn't trying to get our Texas exes riled up. I didn't do any of that. Yep. I mean, I did everything in a very collegial manner, but people don't like what they hear. They get upset.
And they take the, oh, he's a jerk, they say.
Right, and it's kind of like, I remember, everybody here remembers when you're a kid in school and there's no dumb question, right? Well, I learned here that there are dangerous questions.
Yeah.
And when in this environment, when you ask questions that are not liked, it becomes dangerous.
Right. Let me ask you, we're going to move to questions here shortly, but I can't resist asking a couple more while I have you up here. Let me ask you about the bad guys in this. You have identified in the course of the public responses you have made.
Right.
I'm referring to them as the bad guys in all this. Quote from your statement following the censure. Speaker Strauss and his committee have abused the public's trust to cover up their improper interference in the system. You put the blame for this in part at the shoes of not only Speaker Strauss, but also Governor Dewhurst, do you not?
Absolutely. Unequivocally. When I go back and look at when the real public furor began and gasoline was blown on the fire, I go back to the joint session of the House and the Senate, rare joint session, where Lieutenant Governor Dewhurst went to the podium and tearfully defended President Powers, which is fine, but also made allegations that members of the board were doing conducting character assassination, et cetera. Later on that evening, sent a threatening text message to Alex Cranberg, concerning Alex and myself. And
what was the content? I'm not aware of what the content of that threatening text message was.
The content was basically, Alex, why are you doing this? Why are you and Wallace doing this? I've already told Bill, these are the two reforms he's going to do. He's agreed to it. So now we got the Lieutenant Governor acting as the board. And then basically he said, we're going to put the wood to you. And I'm like, wow, that's
the put the wood to you comment. Okay.
And then in the days that followed, we had Senate Bill 15 created. We had Dan Branch, say he's asked his staff to look into impeachment. You had the Joint Oversight Committee reestablished. And, it's all out war, which is to use Senator Zaffarini's terminology. And, but that was clearly an attack on the board's ability to do its job. It was an effort to intimidate. Now, when I speak of Speaker Strauss and Chairman Pitts, I frankly don't believe Chairman Pitts. I don't think he had the votes to impeach me, and I think he knew it, and I think Speaker Strauss.
And you think the reason that you're not impeached today,
is
because the votes aren't there?
I think the reason that they didn't bring it to the fore in June was because he didn't have the votes.
Didn't have votes.
So they created, in the words of Speaker Strauss, an experimental committee to conduct this effort. And three things about Speaker Strauss. One is I sat with Reeve Hamilton at the Texas Trib Festival last year. But prior to me, my opportunity, Speaker Strauss talked about the fact that the reason he was doing it, he didn't mention the oversight of the system. He didn't mention to protect UT Austin. What he talked about was to defend his members from perceived attacks from the board. That doesn't sound like oversight of the UT system to me, so that's a problem. And a second problem I had was when the Hardin report was coming out, had been sent to the board or sent to the committee. Speaker Strauss took the time on a Friday afternoon to go to the governor's office to tell the governor's staff, while the governor was out of the country, that there were 7 proposed impeachable offenses, 3 of them criminal, 1 of them potentially a felony. An hour later, a senior member of his staff called the governor's staff back and suggested that if the governor would ask me to resign, then we could probably make this stuff go away. I think that's wrong. Okay, I think that's gross interference in trying to.
And so that's what you're referring to with that quote.
In trying to intimidate.
You said earlier, we referred earlier to your comment about President Powers. The fact remains the board cannot do its job as long as he remains president. I look at the board and I wonder how the board can do its job, period. Atmosphere of distrust among the regents, regents not speaking to one another, name calling, chairman of the regents suggests publicly that you should resign.
Right.
I mean, we want to talk about dysfunction. It was said in the censure report that this is not a board of regents and 9 regents, it's 9 individual boards of regents. I wonder how new chancellor, old chancellor, new regents, old regents, how do you all do anything under the circumstances? This doesn't seem like you can work together as a group.
So let's take a look at the reality. First of all, if everybody agreed all the time, you're going to have a real problem.
Well, this is not about agreeing. This is about people secretly taping people in executive session. The board leaks like a colander, you know? I mean, I'm talking about that.
You have to ask Senator Watson about that. He's the direct conduit to the board.
Well, you know that board members and system administrators also leak like colanders. You know that.
Yeah, and by the
both sides.
By the way, I think everything should be in the public, so I don't have a problem with the public knowing.
You have a problem with taping people in executive session?
I didn't have any problem with Alex doing that. I believe in why he did it.
You believe people in the room should have been aware at the time that they were being taped?
Oh, in hindsight, I think Alex probably wished he had. But you know, as I said, I don't have any.
So you think the board can actually function as a
board? The board has functioned marvelously well in spite of everything that's gone on. I mean, when you look at UT RGV, when you look at the 2 medical schools, when you look at the initiatives that are taking place across the system, you know, I think people are going to look back at Chancellor Cigaroa's 6-year tenure, and I think it's probably going to be unmatched in system history for being productive.
I wondered if you would have a comment about him, and you said earlier too that you evaluate his tenure very positively.
Very positively, and I think his legacy will grow meaningfully in the years ahead. I think he's done a terrific job, and I'd also say that Chairman Powell, I can't keep from calling him Chairman Powell, I think he's been an incredible leader. I think he has gotten things done for the UT system, for all of our institutions, that are absolutely incredible. And he did it under the most harrowing of circumstances. And, you know, and I'm very proud to have served with him. And Alex and Brenda. So here's your point. So here we are today, and how dysfunctional are we? Well, I mean, Steve Hicks and I would agree we don't agree on most things. Well, we agreed recently, and we got word last night that the ITL, which is the Institute for Transformational Learning, which oversees our MOOCs and our online efforts, which I think are really some of the most important things we're doing now. Steve agreed that those should be moved underneath the committee which I chair.
Yep.
I mean, that's a big deal.
So you are finding common ground.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And the fact that Chairman Foster felt the need, you know, I wouldn't have done it, you know, to say what he said is fine. We moved on. I mean, he put the ITL underneath my committee.
He also said, in fairness, he also said after calling on you to resign, he also said after the censure report that he didn't think you had done anything wrong.
Right. No, you know, it's part of the narrative that the other side continues to espouse, and the reality of it is, this board has been solid. We faced a hell of a lot of challenges, and we continue to move through them.
Who's going to be the next president of UT? I buried the lead here. I saved the last question for the best, or the best for the last.
I have no idea. We have more people wanting to be on the search committee than
Will you be on the search committee?
Imagine. I doubt it. I don't think I would be. You know, I certainly would. Everybody would like to be on the search committee.
Tell me 3 attributes before we go to questions. 3 attributes in the next president of UT that you are looking for. You know, my colleague Ross Ramsey last night, we were visiting about this, said clearly they were looking for something at UT Austin that at least Regent Hall may believe they're not getting from President Powers. What is the something? And so translate that into potentially attributes that you might see, 3 attributes in the next president if you were able to orchestrate?
You know, I think it's very important that you know, coming from academia doesn't necessarily give you the skill set to manage a multi-billion-dollar operation. So I think if you haven't run a multi-billion-dollar operation, complicated, and set goals, metrics measured to them, and held people accountable, I don't think you should be considered for the job. I think you need to exhibit incredible leadership along the way, and I don't think we should have an internal candidate.
So not somebody who is currently on the UT Austin campus.
That's correct.
What about somebody who's in the UT system itself?
Yeah, possibly.
You would consider the president of another campus, for instance.
Well, you asked for the three, and those are my three.
But I'm just being sure, because you brought up the fact that it shouldn't be somebody currently on the UT Austin campus.
Right.
You're not foreclosing on somebody from inside the system.
Right. Somebody from outside.
UT Austin, but
Right.
potentially inside the system.
Sure.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be my.
Your time as Regent ends in 2017. Okay. You will be a Regent until that day.
Unless I'm removed.
Unless you're removed, you will not ever resign. You have no.
Correct.
Right. Good.
Yes.
Okay. Let's give Mr. Hall a hand. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.